Hello, MCU fans! Today is going to be my breakdown and review of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man episodes 1 and 2. I'll also talk about how the first two issues of the tie-in comics fit within the series, although I'll be doing a bigger breakdown of these issues later, as well as the 3 issues yet to come. In fact, notice Marvel hasn't even released the cover for the final issue because they feel that it is a spoiler for how this all fits into the series. Pretty cool. So, there will be lots of spoilers, both for episodes 1 and 2, as well as mild spoilers for the comics. But as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have a January contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. Okay, so the first thing I want to point out is, where does it appear on Disney+? Now, obviously, it's in the Marvel Animation and Spider-Verse sections, but notice it is not in the Multiverse Saga section, even though X-Men 97 is. So I'm not sure what they're trying to tell us there, but let's keep an eye on it to see if it does end up showing up in the Multiverse Saga section. All right, so I also want to talk about some of the quotes about the series because I think they help us frame how it fits into the overall MCU. So Brad Winderbaum said, it started out as, okay, it's Spider-Man's freshman year, he's going to be a freshman, can we get away with being entirely in the MCU? And very early on in the development process, we realized how locked in that actually made us. We couldn't really use his rogues gallery. We couldn't really use his origin. It was not fun, honestly. We would have had to put so many limiters on our story to get it to lock into canon. All right, so that's why it's not Spider-Man freshman year. So that must mean it's a branch, right? Okay, so this quote is interesting. We're starting at a point in the MCU where Civil War has happened. So the Sokovia Accords have been ratified, so it's modern day, and then Peter gets to his first day at Midtown. I want to point out, nothing in that sentence is correct. Because if you've seen the episodes, which I'm sure you have, you know that Civil War hasn't happened yet. So I'm not sure what's going on with the beginning of that quote. But then it says, a thing happens, which I'm going to try and dance around, and there goes our branch. It's a very recognizable world, but Peter doesn't end up going to Midtown. Okay, so this is implying the branch is happening at the very beginning of the first episode. We're going to see that's not true, though. Instead, I think this is the best and clearest quote I've seen on the series. So, I'm a huge fan of MCU Spider-Man films, but if our show existed in the main MCU timeline, we would be severely limited on the types of stories we could tell, and we would have a pretty short shelf life. And then this is key. Taking place in a sister timeline, one universe over. Whoa, just think about that for a second. Allows us quite a bit more freedom and helps us tell stories that don't necessarily have to go down a familiar route. Sister timeline, one universe over. That to me sounds like they're trying to say this is not even in Loki's tree. It's a totally separate universe, but it's a timeline that is very similar. Interesting. So keep all these quotes in mind as we now look at the series. All right, so first question. Since it's being patterned after the MCU, when did Peter get his powers in the MCU? So in Civil War, we learn that he's had these powers for 6 months. Okay, 6 months from when? Well, the timeline book tells us Civil War happens in spring of 2016. But of course, spring has a lot of months in it. I wish the timeline book had gone down to the month, but that's okay. We know spring of 2016. So in the actual movie, we do see a March date, notice, and we see an April date. So March at the beginning of the movie, April at the end, and we know that there's a month in between the Battle of Lagos and then, of course, the battle at the airport. So there's a month between the beginning and the end of the movie, which is why they have the March and the April dates. However, it is worth noting that WHIH Newsfront did a tweet, they were live tweeting way back then, on May 3rd of 2016, saying that's when the movie started. So there's definitely some controversy on where this movie fits in the MCU, but the bottom line is 6 months earlier would be the beginning of his freshman year. That's the key. So with that as the backdrop, now let's talk about the episodes. So I'm going to start by covering the opening credits, which use a remix of the 60s Spider-Man theme. I love that. We also see lots of images from the comics. In particular, on the left, yes, that is a recreation of the very first page of the first comic Spider-Man ever appeared in, Amazing Fantasy 15. And then this is really cool. Notice on the far left, we can barely see it, but this image is the original design that Steve Ditko had for Spider-Man. That is wild. And then I think this is really cool. We see lots of comic book corner box images. In other words, the image in the upper left-hand corner of the comics. So I'm going to go through each of these really quickly. So this one is inspired by this corner box. This one obviously is the full face corner box. I love the full pose of him here. The dual costume image is really cool. I don't know where they got the webbed one. Obviously, he had webbing under his arms in some of the comics, but I'm not sure where this image came from. Also not real sure where this one came from, but this one is definitely inspired by this one. Then they pan over so we can see more. This one is inspired by this. This one here is really cool. This one is definitely the same swing. Not sure where they got this one from. Love this one, very popular pose. And then the last one is, I think, Spider-Man 2099. So it's just really cool how they're paying homage to all of these comics over the years. All right, so we meet all the different main characters in the opening credits. Aunt May, we meet Nico, who is his high school bestie. And of course, you remember her from Runaways. Will be interesting to see how much they tie into that series. Harry Osborn, of course, he saves his life in the first episode, but we don't see too much of him in the first 2 episodes. On the other hand, Pearl, we see a lot of. That's his childhood crush and former babysitter. And in the comics, at least, she becomes a superhero wave. We'll see if they go that direction or not. And then we meet Lonnie Lincoln, who is Peter's rival for Pearl's affection. And of course, in the comics, he becomes Tombstone. So again, lots of potential villains and superheroes with these main cast characters. All right, so each episode has a comic book cover image. Of course, this one is inspired by Amazing Fantasy 15. We're going to see lots of references to that in the first episode. I love that the opening is patterned after Civil War with the same typeface. In fact, we can see Avengers Tower there. And then here's what we saw in Civil War. And of course, there's Avengers Tower. So they're really making you think back to Spider-Man's first appearance in Civil War. Also, speaking of first appearances, Peter wakes up with Amazing Fantasy 14 on his face. Why is it number 14? Because that's the issue right before the infamous number 15, which is his first appearance. Because basically, this episode is his origin, which of course we see in Amazing Fantasy 15. You probably recognize the voice, right? That's Hudson, who did all of the What If voices for Peter. I thought he did a great job in this series as well as in What If. Love that. And then we see that it's the first day of freshman year at Midtown High, which means this is his 2015 to 2016 school year. So technically speaking, if they stick with IRL dates, this would be Wednesday, September 9th of 2015, because that's when school started in New York in 2015. And it does seem like they're sticking with the overall MCU timeline, because if we notice on this Certificate of Excellence, if we zoom in, it was awarded to Peter from the Stark Junior Science Fair on May 22nd of 2014, meaning he was finishing his first year of junior high at the end of May in 2014. So that works perfectly with him starting high school in September of 2015. All right, so May packs him school lunch. I pack my son's school lunch every day. I guarantee it's not oatmeal in a bag. Ugh. Anyway, because he misses the train, May takes him to school, and we see that May has a fixation with Iron Man, which is kind of funny considering in Civil War how Iron Man was hitting on her. Here again, we see Iron Man over her mirror as she is taking Peter to high school orientation. And then we learn some very interesting facts about Uncle Ben. So number 1, he died recently. And number 2, that means he died before Peter even got his powers. That is so wild. Because Peter says, to have something to distract from everything else that's been going on, making it sound like it's very recent. Things have been different without having Uncle Ben around. So if we can rely on this as being the same in the MCU, we may finally know when Uncle Ben died in the MCU, which would be probably summer of 2015. Pretty cool. But then we see that class is soon to be dismissed because a giant portal opens in the sky and out pops a nasty-looking symbiotic alien. But thank goodness, also out pops Doctor Strange, ready to fight it. I love that the Doctor Strange theme is playing. That was really cool. And he's wearing his yellow gloves, which we saw him wear in Thor Ragnarok, but of course now it's got these black dots, really odd looking. But he says, "Where do you think you're going?" Now, it's worth noting, in at least the main MCU, Doctor Strange did not get his full, Sorcerer Supreme powers until 2017, early 2017. Right now, remember, we're in September of 2015. So what is going on here, right? That's really odd. Plus, notice Peter doesn't really know who he is. It's some kind of magical wizard guy, but he will, as we'll see later, know who Captain America is and Hawkeye, etc. So this is very interesting. Like, Doctor Strange shouldn't be here, right? In fact, he even says that. Wait, where are we? Oh no, we're not supposed to be here, he says, when he sees Midtown High School sign. So, man, there is a lot of strange stuff going on here that I suspect will be answered in later episodes. Also, out of the portal comes this crazy-looking spider, which is kind of like how Miles got his powers in Into the Spider-Verse. I don't think they're trying to connect to that, but it is interesting. It is interesting indeed. Anyway, the school is now badly damaged during the fight, but the symbiote seems very interested in Nico. So I'm not sure if that was intentional or if she just happened to be the one, helpless on the ground. But anyway, the symbiote goes after her big time. But luckily, Peter shows some courage, even though he doesn't yet have his powers. That's pretty cool. I don't think she's interested in you, buddy, he says, and screams at the symbiote. And then Doctor Strange now is able to hogtie the symbiote. I love the 8 arms. That's pretty cool. And says, good save, kid, as he takes the symbiote away. And just like that, we're left wondering what on earth happened. In fact, everybody is standing there looking at the damage, realizing, well, we ain't going to school, but they all want to know what was up with Doctor Strange. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. But the spider then decides to make its move and lands on Peter, and then as he is introducing himself to Nico, it bites him. Now, this is fascinating. Remember I talked about the comics. This is from literally issue number 1, the first panels. So the comics pick up right at this point where they're introducing each other and the spider bites him. So we'll talk more about the comics in a second, but definitely they're tying in very tightly with the show, which is great. All right, so we have to keep an eye on this because the spider then jumps on somebody's backpack. We don't know whose, but I have a feeling that spider will be returning. So we see Peter collapse on the ground, and then back to the comics just for the minute to show you that literally they pick up from that moment of him getting back up, waking up, and calling the paramedics. That's in the comics. However, in the episode, we jump a few months later. So I think what's happening is all 5 of these issues are going to be occurring during those few months. They're going to show us his initial battles, how he built his suit, how he built his web shooters, etc. And then Marvel promises a big-time tie-in and surprise with the final issue, again, which they're not even showing us the cover. So I will be covering all of these as they come out. All right, so again, we've jumped several months forward, and now Peter has started his web-slinging career. We see him jumping through the air, and oh my word, there's no way I would want to do this. I mean, this weird tube of webbing on his back with literally lines running to his web shooters, those could easily be destroyed in a fight, and I think that's probably going to end up happening if he doesn't get out of this suit quickly. All right, so we see one of his first saves is Harry Osborn, and I think that's important because this might be what actually got Norman Osborn to pay attention to Peter Parker and Spider-Man. We'll see whether that ties together or not. But while Peter is saving him from the robbers, they're literally live streaming the battle. One dude says it's the newest Avenger, Trash Man. But of course, Peter makes quick work of these dudes. And again, some of these lines are really funny. Somebody says, you got beat up by a guy wearing hockey pads? LMAO. Love it. And then Peter says, don't forget to not like and subscribe. And wouldn't you know it, there's already somebody on the live stream saying, hey, come over and watch my channel. It's got better content. Too funny. Too funny. All right, so Harry is quite happy. Thanks, Peter. And of course, Peter says, just consider it a good deed from your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So again, I just have to wonder whether this is going to tie into why Norman Osborn was interested in Peter and Spider-Man. All right, so we even see the newspaper, the Daily Bugle, talking about the spider vigilante sightings are on the rise. And of course, this is an homage once again to Amazing Fantasy number 15. So, because Midtown High was pretty much destroyed, they're off to their new high school, Rockford Bales. So obviously, if this is a branch off the main MCU, we're clearly in the branch at this point. But I think we're going to see that the branch would have to be way earlier than this point. So Peter is in class trying to learn, but there's always an emergency at hand, right? He hears the police sirens, makes up some excuse so he can go check them out. And then as he's web-slinging, we see a very familiar face, right? It's that dude from Shang-Chi that was recording the bus fight. And of course, he also showed up in Homecoming asking Spider-Man to do the backflip. So very cool. But Peter doesn't care. He's got to take off. And then as he's web-slinging, we get a really nice timeline indicator. So over here on the far right, if we blow that up, it sure looks like it's saying spring of 2016. Now, that kind of looks like a 5 also, but I think there's just dirt on there. So I'm going to go with them saying that we are 100% aligning with the MCU timeline, and we are in spring of 2016. All right, so this is interesting, though. Notice on the cop car, PDNY instead of NYPD. And also, we have joined the NYFD instead of the FDNY. So they're trying to show that there are some opposites in this universe. And that really reminds me of the switch we saw in Multiverse of Madness between red and green lights. Remember Doctor Strange is like, we go on red? So if you look back at that quote that I showed you earlier, that this is taking place in a sister timeline, one universe over. I really think that's what they're trying to tell us. I do not think this universe is in Loki's tree. I think it's off in a separate universe, just like 838 was. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on that. Okay, so then we get this really cool nod to Civil War, where Peter stops this van right before it hits the bus. And of course, that's the exact scene that Tony was showing Peter to prove to him that he's Spider-Man. Love that. And then it is nice to see that people are appreciating Spider-Man's work, applauding him. Of course, J. Jonah Jameson clearly is not attacking him yet. So then we head to Peter's school and we officially meet Pearl. I talked about her in the opening credits, right? She used to be his babysitter when he was a kid, but now he has a big crush on her. But he does not ask her out in time because Nico points out, too late, Lincoln's dating her. Just figures, right? And to make matters worse, Lincoln is now his lab partner. Peter's like, oh, gee, wonderful, right? So I do think this tie between the two of them is going to be very important. And then this is cool. We see later that evening that Peter lets a petty thief go free, basically saying, please don't make me regret this. Nice to see him showing mercy to people and giving them a second chance. And in fact, because he did that, he's rewarded with some free pizza. Yes, it is pizza time. I love that reference to the second Spider-Man movie with Tobey and his infamous pizza time line. So then we get some amazing parallels to Civil War. So Peter finds a DVD player in the trash. He says, free pizza, free DVD player, best day ever. And of course, in Civil War, he talks about finding a perfectly good DVD player just sitting there. And then we see him entering his apartment to a familiar song, Left Hand Free, which of course is the same song they played during Civil War. He passes by someone in the hallway, just like he did in Civil War. And of course, there's this person on the floor, which in Civil War, they happen to be on the phone. So things are similar yet different. Then I love this. How was school today? Oh, it was okay. How was school today? Oh, it was okay. And this crazy car parked outside. Aunt May pointing over to someone. Aunt May revealing Tony Stark. What are you doing here? Sorry, I'm Peter. Hey, I'm Peter. And then finally we get our big difference. It ain't Tony Stark, it's Norman Osborn. Very, very cool. So I just love how they paralleled so much, trying to show this is a sister timeline, but is definitely in a different universe. And then we move to the closing credits, and is it just me, or is the closing theme really, really familiar to the 1981 Spider-Man closing theme? I listened to them back to back, and it just seems like they're pulling a lot of the same beats from that, which is really, really cool. All right, so then we move to episode number 2. Notice we get another comic book cover, Oscorp over on the far right, because that's going to play a big role in this episode. So this is so important, a very key point. Everyone knows who Norman Osborn is. Peter says, May, he's like one of the most famous guys in New York City. Yet we remember from No Way Home, Oscorp doesn't even exist in the main MCU. Not just he's not popular, the company doesn't even exist. So that's why I'm saying if this were to be a branch off the main MCU, it would have to be decades ago, not during the first episode, like that one quote was saying. And then Norman offers a big opportunity for Peter. I'm offering you an exclusive internship, Peter. But Nico is a little concerned, right? Nobody gets as scary rich as that guy without doing some shady stuff along the way. Oh, I suspect you are very correct, Nico. But she does say, if you take a side gig from Roxxon Oil, then I'm staging an intervention. Love the reference to Roxxon Oil. Roxxon is the big bad corporation that has shown up in so many different TV shows and movies over the years. All right, so poor Peter cannot catch a break when taking his ID pictures, right? There's this terrible picture, but of course, we remember this one from Far From Home. Man, dude cannot catch a break. So next we start to meet tons of people who may or may not turn out to be villains, all working for Norman Osborn. This is nuts. So Jay Gallo might be Jonathan Gallo, who is Ricochet in the comics. And then we meet Jean, who at least in the comics might be Finesse, who has ties to Taskmaster of all people. We meet Asha from Wakanda, and she in the comics has the ability to virtually appear or disappear at will. And we meet Amadeus Cho, who may or may not end up hulking out, and of course is the son of Helen Cho, who we met in Age of Ultron. And we meet Dr. Bentley Whitman, who may or may not end up being the Wizard, a famous Fantastic Four villain. And then finally, we meet a race and gender swapped Dr. Carla Connors, who may or may not become the Lizard. So, my word, lots of dangerous employees working for Osborn. All right, so we get this nice little call out for Hawkeye. Nothing gets past you, Hawkeye. And we also get a call out for Stark and his Stark arc reactor because they're trying to make a new self-sustaining battery because, of course, Stark has the patent on his. So it's kind of cool to see Osborn basically being a rival organization to Stark Industries. And then we see a reference to Crusher Hogan on the news, and in those tie-in comics, we do see Peter fighting Crusher Hogan. And again, I will do a separate breakdown of those tie-in comics. We see that Harry is styling for the cameras, a part of the Time 100. So then we see Peter is off to fight again, this time versus Butane. Now, there is a Butane in the comics, but ain't no way he's tied to this guy because they're totally different. But Butane is now monologuing like a true villain. He says, the developer's paying me buku bucks to burn this whole block down so they can buy it back for cheap. You're looking at the future site of 52nd Street's newest luxury high-rise. Of course, it's hilarious when he realizes he's on 51st Street. Dope. But the question is, who is the one asking him to burn all this stuff down? Now, in the tie-in comics, we do meet Silvermane and the Manfredi family. We'll have to see whether they're the ones behind this or not when I do my breakdown of the comics. But we do get this interesting clue when Peter notices a mysterious symbol, which doesn't really look like the Oscorp logo. And of course, why would Oscorp stamp his own logo on there? But it looks similar enough that you have to wonder if Oscorp isn't somewhere behind this. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But now we find out that Peter has been called in to see Norman Osborn, and he passes by this photo of Norman and Captain America, showing how prestigious Norman is in this universe. And then Norman shows Peter the footage of him changing to Spider-Man, which is very similar to Tony Stark, showing Peter the footage saying, hey, look, that's you, right? And in fact, Norman says, you're Spider-Man. So what a good cliffhanger, right? I mean, where do we go from here? Does Peter start working for Norman? I bet Norman gives Peter a lot of those outfits that we saw in the opening credits. So now we wait for the next episode to drop. Oh, I'm sorry, the next 3 episodes. If you weren't aware, we're getting basically 3 next week, 3 the following week, and then 2 the final week. I think it's both to get the series done in time for Daredevil Born Again in March, but also because these are shorter episodes and it just makes more sense to do more than one at a time. So I love this release schedule. Cannot wait for the next episodes. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think I missed anything? Are you excited for the series? What was your take? I am loving it so far. So don't forget, January contest, be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook, and we have the membership option in case you're interested in that. And then I always love to mention the Discord. Here we are in the spoiler section for your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, talking about different connections, even with potentially Multiverse of Madness. So we have 1,900 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and I'll leave a pinned comment so you can be part of them. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.